Hello and welcome to GreenMent. And today we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And joining us, as always, is Dr. Hamed Al Sinawi. Welcome to our program. How would you define PTSD?
PTSD. So basically, PTSD is a psychological disorder that happens to people if they are experiencing or witnessing an extreme stressful event. So classically, it used to include people who are subjected to crime, hurricanes, volcanoes, people who witness war. So anything that is beyond the usual stressful event. But then the definition got extended. It's entirely up to the person to decide how stressful is that particular event.
Because one of the major issues is that the person relives that episode.
The central theme or the symptoms, it's about reliving the episode. So the person will feel anxiety, they feel that they have nightmares, flashbacks, taking them into the time of the incident. Some of them can vividly dream about it happening again. So if, for example, if somebody was caught in flooding, remember when we had Jono and Shaheen in the previous one, so people will relive that experience that they are still there, caught in that extreme flooding. They feel they are unable to escape. They wake up frightened. They will be vigilant. So for some people, every time they see clouds and rainy weather, they feel very unrested because they worry it might happen again. For some people, symptoms might vary. So some people will have the anxiety. They might have sleep disturbance. They might even get depression because they are unable to cope with those symptoms.
Now, people say time really heals. Yes. Do they just wait for it to go naturally, or should they actually proactively take steps?
Good question. Yeah, again, it varies on the person's ability to cope, the person's the type of stress. So certain events, for example, being threatened to be murdered, or surviving a murder attempt, or being sexually, physically abused, the impact will last for a very long time and might affect the ability to build trust with others. So the trauma will be internalized and taken for a long period of time. If it doesn't, if the event causes severe distress and the person is unable to cope with life, then it's time to seek professional help.
There is stigma in the sense, I think culturally, in some countries it's okay to talk about it, but for some cultures it is better to internalize. You said, they keep it to ourselves and almost feel it's a weakness to talk about.
Yeah, that's quite right. Actually, they say you are a weak person to complain, like so-and-so had something difficult, worse than that. Why are you reacting?
Haven't you moved on?
Exactly. So that makes the person feel even more guilty. They make them feel low self-esteem because everyone else is expect them to move on, but they have difficulty coping with the situation. It's always worth understanding that this is a personal experience. Others will not be able to appreciate. So you can either empathize with the person or just don't interfere. So you wouldn't help actually by dictating to the person a certain way of coping.
Now, in this kind of a situation, the others also need counseling on how to behave.
Exactly.
We don't give much attention to this at all. I mean, everybody is just saying whatever they feel like.
Yes, but
to a very delicate person.
Usually, if a person comes to consultation or for therapy, we include the family if they are willing to do that. So there's something called psychoeducation. So family therapy is included. Okay. The family would know how, to what degree they can have a balanced approach toward this. They don't have to push the person, and they don't have to, stop them from progressing and understanding that this is a personal experience. Everybody deal with trauma differently. So I encourage them, be less judgmental, and allow them to, restructure their life around the trauma and seek help when that is necessary.
Do you think there should be more awareness even from the school level in education?
Definitely, awareness is important, and the earlier we start, people will have a wider scope toward awareness about mental health problems. I understand that during the hurricanes there was some interventions. People started to talk about psychological first aid. So we all know about first aid, that if somebody has a burn or has a cut or they get arrested,
you know what to do,
there is something. But if there is in such emotional crisis, how do you deal with that? So in short, the idea is to have the person and recognize that help is around, but don't force them, because yet initially during the shock period, people want to have their own system of recovery or system of coping. If we were talking about a disaster, physical disaster, then offering the physical means, so shelter, water, clean water, somewhere to sleep, it is more important, some kind of safety from further damage. So these are, they come first, and then when the person is ready, just reassure them that help is around, but don't force it on them.
Okay, so the first thing is to give them the time.
Yes.
Is this where they're going through a stage of acceptance?
Acceptance is one of the process, because some people usually they go through denial to begin with, and then after denial comes anger. Why did this happen to me? And then they try to negotiate, and then finally they go through depression or acceptance. So people react differently, and it's important to acknowledge that this is something that needs to be addressed instead of denying it for a long time.
Could you also tell us, is it true that there are times when the PTSD comes much later?
Yes. So some places or some situation, the PTSD is delayed, or the symptoms will continue to progress for a long period of time. Sometimes PTSD can be related to difficulty, for example, a difficult labor. So the woman will only recall this during her following pregnancy, so she would anticipate a similar pain or trauma. If the mother, for example, lost the baby during first childbirth, that
she'll have the fear.
Exactly.
And this also will have an effect on the child.
Yes.
Unborn child, yes. So this is the reason I was asking you, is it important for people to know more? Because the consequences of what we go through as in mental health, which may not be visible, but is quite deep-rooted.
Definitely, and can impact your life in several ways. For example, some people who are unable to cope with PTSD, they end up using drugs or alcohol just to numb their feelings, because they shy out from seeking professional help, so they go through what we call self-medication. It's not actually medication, but resorting to unhealthy habits, unhealthy coping habits, which have long-term effect on their life.
Now, how long does it take for somebody to come out of PTSD with the right help?
It varies again to the type of trauma the person was subjected to, their ability to accept and internalize the new ways of dealing with the situation. We talk about resilience. Resilience is a big concept in general. So if the person has a good level of resilience, they will be able to bounce back to the previous level of functioning easier than others. Sometimes it might be difficult if it is multiple trauma. For example, if there was sometimes you hear about horrible stories where there is a car accident where everybody died except this particular person. Yes. And then there's something we call the survivor's guilt. So that person start questioning, why were they spared? Could they have, even worse if that person is the driver. So he will carry the guilt of not just losing the people, but feeling that they have contributed to this.
And is there also a possibility that it can reoccur?
Yes, the occurrence does happen, especially in situation, for example, of earthquake or natural disasters, where the person, I'll give you the example of the person who went through the hurricane, and so any weather changes can trigger. So this triggering the process, the person gets in that anxiety state. So
there is no foolproof as such. There's no proof that, they're healed forever.
Yes, but there's so much of a guarantee to say you will go to heal forever, because again, it depends. Because if you feel yourself, if the person find themselves getting trapped through the same situation, this would let them to feel hopeless and helpless, which is very dangerous sign and could be part of a depressive syndrome. So again, especially if somebody is repeatedly getting mugged or getting threatened or subjective to abuse, so domestic abuse, so whether physical or sexual, they feel trapped in that situation. Their relationship with the whole world changes.
What happens if the person begins to accept that trap? Who takes initiative to bring them out?
I think if if a person who's younger age is their caregiver, the parents or the legal person responsible about them is supposed, because that's part of being a parent, is that you look after your children, you keep them safe, and you see them more developed and having more stable life.
Because sometimes they do feel defeated and they feel this is the norm.
Definitely. And actually, if we're talking about abuse, the parents' reaction will have a major impact how this person can cope with this and recover. So if they feel understood, they feel supported, that will be easier for them to come out of it. If they feel that the family were all into this, they are keeping it as a secret. Some families will claim
they feel ashamed.
Exactly. So they're made to feel the cause for this.
In such a situation, the parents themselves need
definitely training. Yes.
So do they come for help?
But sometimes it's very complicated, because if usually in some of kind of domestic abuse, the parents are the usual suspect or a very close family. It's a person that the child is supposed to trust.
Yeah.
This is where it becomes dangerous to speak out. And it's not as black and white, because sometimes the abuse is camouflaged as a way of care. So it's part of a package of caring. So they brainwash the child to believe that this is how love is demonstrated.
In such a situation, the help might be much delayed.
Yes. This is where some schools are starting to have topics about abuse, about having boundaries when it comes to body parts, where the person, even the child at a younger stage, is taught where they should not be touched, and their body is quite sacred, and they could identify the signs of abuse from early.
Has it helped, do you think?
I didn't come across any evidence-based, but I think usually being aware will allow the person to understand. For example, in the state in the West, they say stranger danger. So it means that you're not supposed to talk to stranger when you are in a public place.
Okay.
So that's a sign that you should not trust with anybody. You should not be an easy target. So I think the child should have some form at an appropriate age to understand the boundaries and signs when they should feel that this is not a healthy situation.
Great. Well, on that note, as PTSD is so important that most people could have it in one way or the other. A storm, a cyclone could be a clear signal, but there could be others who are trapped in with no way to express themselves. And we hope this gives them an incentive to reflect, think. Sometimes, as you said, resilience is the most important. Can everybody have resilience? Is it a natural inborn trait, or does it have to be cultivated and convinced?
It's a combination. I think that people have a level of resilience that you can build on, but obviously being open to discover new ways of coping, having that personal faith inside you, having the right amount of confidence that you could get out of this situation is important.
Thank you, Dr. Hamed, for your time, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back with yet another topic next week. Until then, take care.